like to welcome everyone. My name is Leslie London, and I'm at the University of Cape Town. I'm also a member of the People's Health Movement Steering Committee for South Africa, and I'm also support for Southern African Alcohol Policy Alliance. And this webinar is jointly hosted by PHM and SAAPA, and thank you all for attending. And as you know, the focus is on how we get public participation in decisions around alcohol policy, around how alcohol is made available or not made available, as the case may be. And it's a very important issue because even though it's focused just on alcohol, it affects our lives more generally, because as we know, health is more than just healthcare. It's about all the social determinants of health. And alcohol is a major determinant of things which are not good for our health. We expect that in the way government runs itself and makes decisions, that the public can participate, that people can participate. We know that there are many public participation processes, whether it comes to the environment, whether it comes to alcohol, whether it comes to an NHI, where people are expected to have a say. But quite often, who gets to have a say meaningfully will depend on who you are. And that is what this webinar is really about. Because if you come from a community and you can't afford an expensive lawyer, or you don't have the language to articulate in front of a government official, then what you have to say is maybe not taken so seriously. And also you don't know where you can say what you have to say. So this webinar really hopes to explore the issues in relation to alcohol and the licensing issues and the permitting issues and the decisions around alcohol policy. Given that we know that some forces in society are very influential, and they're influential because of various things. We'll hear that from different speakers: political power, economic power, connection, who you know. And so we want to find out sort of from this webinar who is really a stakeholder, who's actually able to make decisions or influence decisions that government makes. We have 3 speakers. And I think we are going to start, I'm looking at my notes here, I think we are going to start with Aadielah, who's from the Southern African Alcohol Policy Alliance, and she'll sort of set the scene. We'll have 2 speakers after that, I'm hoping, and at least one of them will be talking from a community perspective about how communities have tried to deal with this problem. So I'm not going to speak any longer. I'm going to now hand over to Aadielah to take us through some of the issues for this webinar. Over to you, Aadielah.
But we thought what we'd want to do today is to just share with you one experience of where we had to, in typical South African fashion, had to push for being heard as civil society and communities in relation to the issue of petrol stations getting applying for public for liquor licenses. So we wanted to just share our experience of advocating around the petrol station issue and them applying for licenses. And the key thing for us was that we view petrol stations getting licenses as increasing the harmful availability of alcohol. And this is because if we should have forecourt shops at petrol stations having liquor licenses, one, it would make alcohol more available than it already is. Currently, we have over 150,000 licensed outlets across the country. And in our view, we understood that there are about 5,000 petrol stations scattered across the country, some more concentrated than others in areas. And so we took the position that that would increase it by that amount. We also have an existing challenge around drinking and then driving. Currently, about 59% of drivers that are involved in car crashes test positive for alcohol. And having petrol stations selling alcohol amongst the cool drinks, chocolates, and chips that you go in for, and sometimes for bread, would contribute to normalizing alcohol in our society. And given that children are also accompanying their parents in these petrol shops, they sit in the car, the parents send them in to go and buy bread, a liter of milk, that it would increase children's exposure to alcohol. Currently in South Africa, the liquor licensing process is that liquor licenses is a provincial competency. So national government is responsible for policy setting. And we have an existing national liquor policy of 2016 that in fact clearly suggests that petrol stations should be one of those areas, one of those retail areas that should not have licenses. But in terms of the provincial competency of liquor boards, they take the view that they are obliged to consider every single application, even if they in principle disagree with the fact that a petrol station should get a license. And this is all in the context that we've got a stalled liquor amendment bill of 2017. And from a SAAPA perspective, we think that if the liquor amendment bill had been adopted, that petrol stations would not be able to apply for licenses. And in fact, we think that the petrol stations were pushing the envelope in anticipation of the adoption of the liquor amendment bill. In terms of the process of applying for licenses, liquor applicants need to, one, put up a A4 size notice on the proposed premise. They need to let the neighbors know and get permission. They need to advertise it in the local newspaper. And then they need to put it into the government gazette, where I'm sure all of you know where to get it, read it every day, and respond within the 30-day notice that is given in the government gazette. Underpinning all of this is that there's just a general lack of community consultation. And in the case of this first one that we found in Gauteng, not to say that there had not been already petrol stations that had been selling alcohol, but this was just one of the first that was really going all out to advertise that they have got a wine license at this point. And most of the petrol stations were applying for a wine license. But in looking at the history in South Africa, we found that in the retail sector, that it took less than 10 years for that to be converted into a all liquor license, which means that all sorts of liquor could be sold. And we thought that, just given the context, that would probably be fast-tracked, and that we would, in a very short space of time, petrol stations would be able to apply for a full liquor license. Whilst we were investigating this issue, we came across a report from KPMG, which is called, and you can't see this on the screen, unfortunately, but it's called Fuel Forecourt Retail Market. And what the report suggests, this was a May 2020 report. What the report suggests is that they essentially put forward an economic argument for forecourts becoming one-stop convenience shops, and alcohol should be put within that offer. In terms of how the forecourt could consolidate their offering to communities and service, and also to continue to drive business, that essentially alcohol should become part of the offering. And of course, what it did, it is essentially saying that some of the existing practices. So you have Namibia, our neighbor, for instance, you have Botswana, where you do have alcohol available in at petrol shops. And so what were some of the actions that we undertook? When we found out about this license, we tried to engage a BP head office, as well as the Gauteng Liquor Board. BP ignored us, didn't respond in the way that we had requested. And the Liquor Board's position was that they are obliged to go through the process of application. Of course, we then started engaging and mobilizing support, both what we thought was a bit of an insider voice, as well as amongst our partners. And at the same time, we started monitoring whether or not there were other applications happening. And this process led us to try and clarify what exactly is the position of liquor boards, of all the 9 liquor boards across the country. And then we found that there was complete lack of synergy, that some provinces took this position, and then other provinces like KZN had a clear policy that they won't give petrol stations licenses. And then we undertook our version or our interpretation of public participation. We launched a petition in partnership with SAD. We hosted a protest outside the BP head office, and this was during the COVID period. There were some limitations around that. One of the provinces that we did engage was the Western Cape. We met with the, similar to the Gauteng Liquor Board, we met with the CEO and the community liaison manager, engaged them around this issue. And at the same time, we found that there were 5 applications within the Western Cape area, and that ranged from Sea Point to Salt River, to Somerset West. And so we called up the CPFs, any residential ratepayers association or any community organization, the absence of the ratepayers association, to just try and inform them about the application, and then try to identify communities that would partner with us to try and raise public awareness around this issue. And that's how we decided on the Woodstock Salt River BP station. I think it's at the Salt River Circle. And we hosted a public demonstration on a rainy Saturday morning, and engaged the passers-by to sign the petition. What we found through these actions is that the Western Cape Liquor Board decided to call for public comments on whether or not petrol stations should be awarded licenses. And from our perspective, that was a win for communities. It was a win for civil society organizations, that the Liquor Board took that step. And on the basis of community members putting forward the objection to this, all applications in the Western Cape from BP petrol stations and specifically was rejected. Since then, this has evolved where the Western Cape Liquor Board has provided information about new applications, as well as sending us information about people that are reapplying, particularly those that are red zoned, where they thought, where there were difficulties that people were not adhering to licensing conditions. And in the Gugulethu area, we were able to then collect signatures from people around 2 of these applicants for renewals. Since so that was the big thing from our side. Since then, we have had ongoing actions around this particular issue. So on a monthly basis, we monitor liquor license applications across the 9 provinces. And where we do come across them, we try and respond, phone up organizations, let communities know about these applications, and where we can support them in making submissions of objections. We continue to promote that communities have the right to be consulted. And then, of course, the issue around lobbying for the adoption of the Liquor Amendment Bill, which in the past 2 weeks have come into the public space, that we found out that they're finally saying that they are reviewing it. And one of the areas we think that they will be trying to take out of the amendment bill is this issue around licenses for petrol stations and promoting a whole government approach. And the real apologies that you're not able to see my screen, but I thought I wanted to just put into the conversation the issue around how are we able, the people that have joined us today, how can you help amplify this collective action? What are you or your organization able to do in joining these ongoing actions around trying to prevent petrol stations from getting liquor licenses, both at a community level, but as well provincial and national levels? Are there any actions that you can take as a individual or a community in support of these actions that we are taking? And if there are any other additional actions that you would say would contribute to increasing public participation as opposed to stakeholder participation in the quest to make communities safer. Thanks, Leslie.
Okay, thanks so much, Aadielah. So that's a very helpful example of action, collective action, and perhaps give us some food for thought about how to go forward. I'm going to ask if Maurice from SAAPA can speak next. Maurice, are you able to screen share?
I'm going to, I know I'm supposed to talk about the amendment bill and the road traffic amendment bill, but I'm going to go a little bit broader than that. And I'll try and go through as quickly as I can, just to give a kind of bird's eye view of the whole situation that we face with regard to public participation in licensing and control of liquor outlets, and that will become clearer as I go through. So basically, just for background, the Constitution calls on all spheres of government to facilitate the participation of the public in matters of governance, and the Municipal Systems Act of 2000 requires local government to develop a culture of municipal governance that complements formal representative government with a system of participatory governance. The National Liquor Act provides for the public to participate in the consideration of applications for registration of manufacturers and distributors of alcohol and other related matters. And the Gauteng Liquor Act, I've just taken this as an example, but this applies pretty much across the board in all provinces, in one form or another, allows any person to lodge an objection to the granting of a liquor license and empowers the board to suspend or withdraw a license, which is the subject of a report, complaint, or objection concerning that particular outlet, which could come from the public. So in other words, what the law is saying is that the public should be able to participate, and as far as alcohol is concerned, they can participate by lodging objections to the granting of a liquor license, and that they can also lay a complaint about a liquor outlet that is not operating properly, and should expect to see action taken by the authorities on the basis of that complaint. So that's the background to where we are. So I'm going to look at two issues here in relation to public participation. One is the right of the public to have a meaningful say over when, where, and how alcohol is sold and consumed in the neighborhoods, and which is partly what Aadielah was dealing with. And the second is the voice of the public in the drafting of policies and legislation. So the right to have a say in the licensing and management of the alcohol trade is an unfulfilled commitment in most provinces, because the majority of people are not aware of their rights and how to exercise them, largely because little is done to provide them with access to this information. Provincial liquor authorities either have no websites or have websites which focus on providing information to potential applicants for liquor license, little or no information to the public on their right to object to applications and to report compliance infringements. There are exceptions. Western Cape is a good exception, and even the Eastern Cape, and I think it's happening as a result of Enyobeni, is beginning to introduce new information on their website. Gauteng doesn't even have a website. And the systems, the way in which participation is supposed to happen is not done in a way that facilitates public participation, and provincial liquor authorities are under-resourced. So even when complaints are lodged, there's little action taken. So everybody's living in a state of permanent frustration. Anybody who's living near a non-compliant liquor outlet is living in permanent frustration, because there's very little that they can do about it. There are built-in institutional problems. Sorry, I want to just go, yeah. Built-in institutional problems. Constitutional mandates in respect of licensing and management of liquor outlets. The Constitution says nothing about national mandates related to the alcohol industry, but Schedule 5A of the Constitution says provinces are responsible for liquor licensing, and Schedule 5B gives municipalities control of undertakings that sell liquor to the public. The Constitutional Court in 2000 confirmed the exclusive competence of provinces in respect of retail liquor licensing, which limits the ability of national government to set rules as to how alcohol should be managed in the country. And there's also a little clarity on what exactly Schedule 5B means. Most municipalities don't exercise that mandate anyway. In the Western Cape, they do much more than anywhere else, but again, they seem to focus, from what I can see, largely on fiddling around with the operating hours of liquor outlets, but maybe not much more. There's also uneven intergovernmental cooperation. Provincial governments make their own liquor laws, which vary one from the other. The norms and standards released by the DTI in 2014, signed by all provinces, are largely ignored. Provinces are supposed to take municipal bylaws, zoning regulations, and other local government considerations into account, but they don't. But local government often feels unheard. And provinces, like in the Western Cape, and this was even argued in the case of Enyobeni, although it's not clear whether it was true or not, that provinces issue licenses with stipulated opening and closing times, and in some cases, local government overrides their decision and imposes their own operating hours, usually for longer hours than those allowed by provinces, not shorter. The other systemic challenges are that national liquor legislation is the mandate of the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition. Most liquor authorities fall under provincial departments of economic development, the Western Cape an exception again. So they tend to favor economic over social factors when considering a license application. Addressing alcohol harm in the country is the mandate of the Department of Social Development through the Drug Master Plan and the Central Drug Authority, but they don't make the liquor laws. So the above reality means that economic considerations are generally given precedence over public concerns about alcohol-related harm, which has the consequence of reducing the impact of public participation. And finally, there isn't a whole of government approach to dealing with alcohol-related harm, which just compounds the problem. So public influence over policies and legislation. Public participation we all should be able to participate in policy making and drafting of legislation. While departments, Parliament, and the NCOP call for public input, advertising of course for public participation is usually inadequate. It's like hidden away in a corner of a Sunday newspaper. So participation is often very poor. Timelines for participation are usually quite short. So consultations within civil society structures are often cursory in order to meet deadlines. Quite often, public participants at public hearings are in good faith, bussed in with no prior preparation. So many are not even aware of the issues and unable to participate effectively. And public inputs are often ignored. leading to a gradual fall off in interest and participation because people just don't want to waste their time. So let me run through a couple of bills now. So the Road Traffic Amendment Bill was drafted in 2012, with the second version coming out in 2015 and the third in 2020. Firstly, the extended period taken for drafting legislation leads to a fall off in interest for all those, but those who've got a professional or organizational interest in the issue. Public participation was invited by the department, and then a modified version was sent to Parliament. Parliament invited written participation within a period of a month. Some individuals and organizations were invited to give oral submissions. We did. Parliament made its decisions and conveyed these to the department. One decision was to scrap completely the clause calling for a reduction in the blood alcohol concentration level of drivers. That bill is now with the NCOP, which might invite further public inputs. The Control of Marketing of Alcohol Beverages Bill was drafted by the Department of Health in 2012. A leaked copy was published in the press in 2012, sparking a furious debate. Cabinet approved its release for public comment in 2013, was never released to the public. Media reports suggest that Cabinet was divided. Government spokespeople denied this, but in 2020, Brigida Mbalula, who is Minister of Transport, thinks that alcohol advertising probably should be restricted, admitted that in 2013, when he was Minister of Sport, he opposed it. So there isn't, again, a whole of government approach, and public opinion on this bill has never been canvassed, and so it's now been shelved. The Liquor Amendment Bill was drafted in 2016 to give effect to the new liquor policy approved by Cabinet in the same year. It did go through a public participation process in 2016-2017. It was subject to a socioeconomic impact assessment in 2017, which concluded that if passed, it would save the country lives and money. But all work halted on it from mid-2017, with no pronouncements on it by the new DTIC minister since his appointment in 2019. Sorry, I just went back there. Let me go back. Sorry, going the wrong way. There we go. All work was halted from mid-2017 with no pronouncement by the new ministers since 2019. Calls before and during COVID-19 by civil society for it to be passed have fallen on deaf ears. Ironically, just 2 days ago, there was actually a report in the newspaper quoting the DTIC spokesperson saying it would go to Parliament soon. About an hour ago, I had a conversation with someone from the DTIC, and she confirmed they are working on it, and that some of the problems they're having is getting agreements from other departments where there are overlaps on certain issues. But once again, public participation is very limited. I asked her about that, and she said, well, you know, maybe participation will happen once it goes to Parliament, because I asked her, why are you not engaging with us already? Because we can help. But that's a problem, is that that's not how public participation is viewed, which is a difficulty. So the last one I want to look at is the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill, which the 2015 version of that called for the banning of alcohol on school premises. However, in 2016, the Western Cape proposed a provincial education bill which would allow alcohol at schools and school functions for fundraising purposes. This was opposed by many, including the Minister of Basic Education. It was nevertheless enacted in November 2018. The Minister met with the Western Cape MEC in 2017. And then just after that, the Bella Bill in its original format was released for public comment with a note that prior comments would be taken into consideration. In 2021, a new version of the bill was released, and now it contained the same proposed clauses as those in the Western Cape Bill and Act, calling on schools to be allowed to have alcohol. The Minister and the department responded angrily to media reports on the liquor clauses, claiming that people didn't understand it, and that they shouldn't assume that because alcohol be allowed at schools, that kids could drink. They're missing completely the point of why people were opposed to having alcohol at schools at all. The Parliament invited public comment on the bill. This is one example where public participation did also have an impact, because we and others suggested that the time for comment was too short. And so instead of being for 1 month, it was extended by 2 months after complaints by the public. There apparently are going to be public hearings in all provinces, but the dates are not yet finalized. So an overview of the passage of the 4 bills is that public participation happened, or is happening with 3 of the 4 bills, but the depth of participation is limited, as is the impact. The Bella bill is going to be interesting because, one, most people the SAAPA SA speaks to don't know about it at all, which is an example of how little communication there is between government and people about these issues. The second thing is that when they hear about it, they are shocked and baffled that the department would even consider allowing alcohol in schools. The question is, will the department and Parliament hear this and respond appropriately? And I guess that goes back to what Aadielah was saying, is what can we do as civil society to make sure that they do hear us? It is disturbing that public participation in the deliberations around legislation is treated so lightly by government. In the case of the marketing bill, it's bizarre that Cabinet decided it should be released for public comment, and that was just ignored with no reason given. That after a period of quite intense public participation, the Liquor Amendment Bill was put on hold, again with no reason given, and no public response by the department for over 5 years, and that Parliament chose to throw out the blood alcohol concentration level clause in the Road Traffic Amendment Bill, despite the public and the research community suggesting a compromise between the status quo and the proposals in the bill. An additional problem is the amount of money that goes into drafting the policies, drafting the legislation, dragging it out over years and years and years, and then coming up with legislation that the public just don't buy into. Quite often the legislation is just not adhered to because people don't own it. They don't feel like they were part of drafting it. So the conclusion that one has to reach across the board around public participation issues, that it's still an unrealized goal. For some government entities, it really is a tick box malicious compliance process. They have to do it, so they do it. They get a register and they say, we met, we talked to the public, and then they go and do what they want to do anyway. There's very little easy access to information, the logistics of the participation process, and that has to be improved for participation to be far-reaching and inclusive. Aadielah was talking about the fact that the Liquor Board said that nobody objected. Well, it's not surprising that nobody objected, because people just are not informed. But we also have a situation where very recently I was involved in a particular case where a liquor outlet that applied for a license in Kensington in Johannesburg was opposed by, I think, more than 10, it attracted more than 10 objections, including one from a joint one from the Kensington ratepayers and SAAPA. And somehow, that was in March, and somehow they have a license. So we are trying to find out what happened here, because, we actually were denied the right to actually take part in a hearing to actually talk about this issue and why we were opposed to them having a license. And I think that the other thing is that government's got to be held accountable for their failure to take public participation and intervention seriously. And I have to say that there is one success story that I was involved in from 2013 to 2017, where the Gauteng government behaved in exactly the same kind of high-handed, arrogant way, and decided to push through a particular set of regulations, despite the fact that we pointed out that by doing so, they were actually going to be denying people the democratic right to object to people who applied for those licenses. They chose to ignore us. We took them to court. Fortunately, we had pro bono lawyers. We took them to court. 4 years later, we won the case. The judge threw it out of court, threw the regulations out of court, saying they were ultra vires and not consistent with the Gauteng Liquor Act. They still haven't fixed the problem, but it is an example of where if we do intervene in civil society to show, because government has not taken public participation seriously, we can win. So I think it's an important thing to consider in all of these situations. Thank you very much. I hope that wasn't too long.
Okay, thanks, Maurice. I think if you can stop sharing your screen. I know people might have questions. Can I just ask you to hold the questions and we get our last speaker? It's Nozibele Mdayi. Naomi, are you able to join and share your experiences from Gugulethu?
My name is Noe from Gugulethu, coming from Klipfontein sub-district. I'm a chairperson, Gugulethu Health Forum, chairperson also in Gugulethu. I'm listening carefully, man, on the previous speakers, and it's really sad when talking about public participation in this whole issue of the alcohol, whereby we don't see it. We don't see it, and the bad impact that caused by alcohol in our communities. We repeat saying everything, same thing in this webinars, even in our public meetings, where even I'm sitting, I'm not in my house even now, coming from the meeting, addressing one organization here in Gugulethu that deals with those guys that are really addicted in terms of drug and alcohol. Just here, they are all here in this house here in NY71. What is government doing about all these problems that we identify? There is no public participation. I think instead of out of these webinars that we are having, we have to do something. We cannot every time talk about this thing, and even the time that is given for the community to raise their voice in terms of these alcohol issues. There's no timing. Even the community needs to be educated in terms of these policies. You check when there is this thing of alcohol at schools, even the governing bodies. Last week and yesterday, early, we had even a meeting as Gugulethu Health Forum with one of the schools' governing bodies, whereby they don't even know when you talk about what the governing body says about this alcohol that must be used as fundraising issue at school. They don't know nothing. It seems that they are just even governing bodies that are just listening to principals. What must happen is this and this and this, and they take it from them. You know, we really need to come up with a strategy. If we need to say, let us call all these governing bodies and the community and educate them about this thing of alcohol, because they are the community members that have difficulties in terms of, even you check, even people that lose their jobs, even those are getting 350. What are they doing? Two guys just went to buy 2 cases of beer after they drowned their 350 at ShopRite today and said to make this money to have an increase so that it can be a source of income, I must sell these 2 cases of beers. You understand? So there's a lot that we need to do in terms of alcohol. If there's no employment, people see alcohol as employment, a source of income for their community, for their families, so that they can have extra money. You know, from the point of view of in terms of the history, what we every day talking about in terms of our clinics, in terms of our hospital, whereby you see every holiday, weekend, Friday, you must be worried that there's phone call that is going to come to the health forum member saying that there's a lot of people that are red, those people that fight, those people that embark in accident when they are drunk. And then you'll find out of that, most of the budget of the DOH, Department of Health, is used in terms of when those people are in that situation. They are drunk, they are in accident, you understand? So I really don't want to repeat the frustration that we have in terms of alcohol, and then we are not doing nothing. After this, we have to come with a strategy. If we say because of these public hearings that are limited timing for the community to throw their voice, let us do something. Even if we say in terms of policies, the community knows nothing about what are these policies talking direct to the community in terms of the frustration that we have in terms of alcohol, then there's nothing that talk direct to us. Then we mustn't sit and fold arms. Let us do something about that. If government is doing policies, not involving us, what are we saying? We always
Noe, you're on silent. Noe.
you know, instead of, yes, it's good to engage, but what are we all doing with all these organizations that are doing interventions in terms of alcohol, and come in one roof and see what strategy in Western Cape that we can do to go straight to Parliament, to go straight to government, to oppose even to oppose those policies that they made even without us. You understand? Talking about the public participation, you will see even when we talk about licensing, we vote for councillors that's supposed to come to us when these people are applying for licensing for the alcohol. But these things don't come to, if you don't challenge and go to those sub-council meetings, you won't even know that someone in your street is applying for license, you know. But we know that the policy says, even those bylaws of the council says, before that person can be given the license, it must go to the community in that street. The community must say something. But you will find out those people get licensing of alcohol without even hearing from the community from that area or from that street. Now, I don't want to talk a lot. It's really had a bad impact, even when we talk about the age, you know. Now, yes, we must take a responsibility also as parents, because we are the ones that you will let your 6 years old go to the ship and go buy a beer for you. Why are we doing that as community? That's why I said, yes, we take a responsibility to teach our children and to know where to get off in terms of accessing even the alcohol in our houses also. You know, before we can go to government, let us get our house clean first and see what education can we provide. We've got street committees where can we go straight and filter to street committees and educate them. One time we have a meeting with other organization here when we were posing the issue of alcohol and said, yes, man, but you have to close at 9 o'clock. This is too much. You cannot sleep at night and all these things. This guy said to you, you know, I'm a teacher, I'm selling alcohol. The money is not even enough. I'm a teacher because my mother was selling alcohol. And this is alcohol money that makes me to be a teacher today, you know. So that's why I said really education is needed, where to get in and where to get off in terms of this. It's really a frustration for a community, but what we are talking about this thing, but what are we doing? We've been signing petition and all these kinds of things, but that we are doing, when are we going to go straight even to the city council? Why I said the city, you will find out if there is advertisement of those people that are applying for licensing. It's in our local newspaper. I'm sitting with one now. It's just at the back of the Vukani newspaper that we get every Thursday in Guguletu. No one's look at that because it's in the fine font at the back. What we're looking at when we get newspaper is all those mgoses that who rape, who does what to who. We don't look at the things. And those bylaws will pass those bylaws will pass. If not even one person has just mentioned or just have input on those bylaws, then will be a deadline, a cutting off the date. Even why I'm saying we need to go direct even to ECT, why they don't do this public participation also to a community, so that community can raise their voices in terms of this alcohol issue. Today we are sitting with dropouts. It's the bad impact to the community. We are sitting to dropouts. These kids are just drinking at the age of 12. 12 is even 10 years old. You will see them walking up and down. We have that brutal fruit. You will drink. You are 65 years old. Maybe it's a drink. And it's alcohol that they are taking. But what are we doing at this platform? After we've talked, because I don't like talk, because talk is very cheap. After we have this webinar, what strategy are we coming with? I will propose that after this, we go direct and claim that the government, when they are doing these policies and this public participation, the community must be involved in all of this, because it had really a bad impact to our community. I think I can stop there, Prof.
Thank you, Mdayi. Thanks for covering a lot of ground, because you've made a lot of suggestions for us to think about. But maybe people have questions for any of the speakers before we talk about what we can do next. You've made a lot of suggestions what we can do, but let's just get if there are any questions. Anybody have any questions? I'm giving people a bit of time to catch their thoughts. Anybody want to ask any question? Vanessa, yes, over to you.
Thank you, Prof. My question is just how do they define public participation? Let me introduce myself. I'm actually working for a trade union. My joining this webinar is in terms of the safety of the forecourt attendants itself, because we've had lots of robberies, lots of killings already of forecourt attendants. And how would this, by giving licenses to petrol or to forecourts, that would just put more fuel on the fire in terms of what's currently happening?
Yeah, good point.
And my question basically directly was the definition of public participation, because where do we fit in representing our members in terms of their safety when it comes to drunkards? People are free to drink, but selling alcohol at a premises where people are working late at night, they are already in danger with people assaulting them.
That's an excellent point. Thanks, Vanessa. I don't know if any of the speakers want to respond to that. Aadielah, Maurice, Mdayi, anybody want to respond?
Can I go in terms of public participation?
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about public participation, Vanessa, we talk about you will get that there are laws, like there are suggestions that are given by ECT saying that at 9 o'clock, all those who are selling alcohol, their ship-ins must be closed. Né? Or you will get something like 9 o'clock, 18 years old are not supposed to go chew at the ship-in and buy alcohol, When we talk about public participation in terms of government, when they are doing those policies, they've got their officials. They are officials that they employ that suppose when they are busy establishing or compiling those laws, it must go direct to a community. Né? Organizing meetings like the meeting they organize of IDP. You understand? Organize those meetings before these laws and policies. Have meetings in their wards. They have got ward councillors. In parliament, they've got portfolio committees. They've got portfolio heads of health, they've got portfolio heads of business or whatever. So those people must come out of the corridors and come and educate people, or come with the message of now this is going to take place in this time and this time, and the cutting date is going to be this. We will find out on the last date when they say this is a bylaw or this is a policy and people are supposed to participate in this, and then tomorrow is the cutoff date. People have never ever seen that, have never even participated in that, to throw their views, but they are officials that's supposed to come and address the community, so community can raise their voice in terms of those policies and those bylaws that they put on our local newspaper in a fine print at the back.
Thanks, Mdayi. There are a couple of other hands, but I just want to add to what Mdayi said, Vanessa. So I'm also a member of the Civic, and our Civic had a meeting with the Western Cape Liquor Authority about the issues, and the Western Cape Liquor Authority came to meet us after hours. And then they said to us, you must get the city to come meet you. And the city officials did not want to come after hours because they only work from 9 to 5 or 8 to 4. And they made a time in the middle of the day and people work. So we said, no, we can't meet you in the middle of the day. You've got to come to us. This is participation. And of course, they never came. But I think what Maurice was saying, that the interventions around the forecourts, I mean, the union should be part of that consultation and making submissions across all the provinces. I'm not sure where you're based, but it would mean that the union has to go to every single province to try and lobby around that. But perhaps there's a response from, I see Tinashe and Khadija have their hands up. Tinashe, did you want to respond? Or is this a new question?
No, mine is just a simple short input that I've experienced working with corporate. They come up with these terms of saying that they're going to come and be responsible to the community that they are serving, the issue of social responsibility. But we know very well that the social responsibility is not really social responsibility. It's just a drop in an ocean that they are doing to the community. They damaged in minings and so forth, and then they come say they are going to put the road. Who's going to save that road? Who's going to be saved by that road? It is the same mining that is going to be saved by that road. We've got SAB, they've got a foundation that they are supporting entrepreneurs, but then that's very, very little against the damages that they are causing in the community. So it's high time that as activists, we start questioning the social responsibility, the way that they're calling social responsibility. Is it really social responsibility, or it's a way of twisting the government's arm so that they can find their way through into the industry and into our communities? We've got very, very poor communities where people are struggling to access healthcare facilities because there are no bridges, there are no roads, but still alcohol still finds its way to those poor communities. It's something that we really need to start questioning as activists. Thank you so much, Leslie.
Thank you, Tinashe. I see Khadija next.
Hi, I just wanted to make a comment. In South Africa, we're generally very used to protest politics, and I was wondering whether there's some way in which one can promote like digital citizenship in this whole improve digital citizenship because I went online and you know, the Western Cape Liquor Board has an online portal where you can actually lodge complaints, and one wonders how one can empower the community either through developmental fora or civic associations to actually start using these digital fora and webinars like today to organize ourselves into ways in which we can improve our own ability to increase or improve our digital citizenship, to have intersectional complaints, how we can actually mobilize around it as in online. Yeah.
So thanks, excellent suggestion. Thank you, Khadija. So that's something we can pick up on. I see Maurice and then Aadielah. I don't know if either of you are going to respond to Vanessa, but over to you, Maurice.
No, I think Aadielah was before me, Leslie.
Okay, there you go, Aadielah. Over to you.
Okay, thanks. So Leslie, I think that all the key issues is that we need to separate this issue and distinguish between public participation and stakeholder consultation. Because we need to hold government, as Noe says, we need to hold government accountable for not lumping public participation, meaningful public participation, as just a stakeholder. There should not be equal weight given to talking to business versus to communities. And I think that is the one thing that perhaps out of this meeting, we could draw up some kind of statement that we have everybody sign on, that we could be presenting to different authorities around making this distinction between meaningful public consultation and stakeholder consultation. Just with regards to what Vanessa said, of course, we would support that workers has got the right to be protected and the right to safety, and that they should have the right to be consulted in this process as well. And that public there are different segments within public. So you have people within a geographical space, you have people who are working within a particular sector, as in this case, you have health workers who have to respond to people that are affected by alcohol harm. So all stakeholders within our different communities should be, and even, I think even in how I've just said it, I've said stakeholders. And so what is it that we need to clarify for ourselves when we talk about who constitutes the public and who constitutes stakeholders, and what's the difference between participating in the process and being consulted by government on these different issues.
Okay, thanks, Aadielah. So I think you've made a very concrete suggestion for something to come out of this discussion, but it also strikes me, Vanessa, that you can proactively start lobbying the different liquor authorities in the different provinces, and maybe SAAPA can work with you to make a submission, because basically the more pressure that gets put on the different liquor authorities in the provinces, they can't just go off and do things on the quiet if they know people are watching them. So maybe that's a suggestion you could follow up with, Aadielah. Okay, so next is Maurice, then I've got Tlamelo, and then Russell. Maurice?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks to Noe in particular for so forcefully and clearly articulating the issues. Because the important thing about Noe's presentation is the fact that she's speaking, completely from the heart and completely honestly about this lived experience that people have and the frustration that people have all the time with these issues, and just feeling like there's nothing they can do about it. And that is the thing that we have to change. And that is one of the core objectives of SAAPA, actually, SA, is to, on the one hand, we're pushing for better legislation, but on the other hand, what we are trying to push for is for government to be forced into ensuring that people actually can participate effectively in all of these processes, because it's completely untenable where you have a situation where people technically have rights, but in fact, government doesn't do anything to facilitate that, and in fact facilitates the rights of people who want to get liquor licenses. And that is across, in most provinces, that is the case. I think as far as the trade unions are concerned, I think it's very important for us to work more closely with the unions, because obviously one of the issues that keeps coming up is that, if you are going to restrict alcohol, then jobs are going to be lost. If people drink less, the companies will make less profit, and therefore jobs will be lost. And that may well be a consequence. But then what we need to do is to work with the unions to then say to government, this is the way you deal with that problem. So you can't have a situation where in trying to deal with one problem, you create another one. Anybody who works in sociology and the social space and planning and so on know that this is that dealing with liquor is what you call a wicked problem. And that's not wicked in a religious sense. It's wicked in the sense that there's never a solution. There's always a resolution. You can try and fix it, but if you do, you're going to create another problem. So then you've got to find out a way to deal with that problem. But that's how it works, and that's what you've got to do, and that's why we call for a whole of government approach, because government needs to understand that they've got to work together on the issue. But I think we also need, as people have said, as Noe said and Vanessa was implying, we need a whole of civil society approach as well, where we all work together to actually put pressure on government and to not let them get away with it. I mean, I think that's the problem. We've let government get away with this kind of stuff for too long. And we've now got to actually hold them accountable. We've got to just say, you cannot actually continue to do this. And if it means protesting in the streets, you must do it. If it means picketing outside buildings, we must do it. If it means taking government to court, we must do it. But if we do it together with a very loud voice, I think that we will actually begin to have an impact. So I think an outcome of this meeting, this webinar, I think must be that we talk about how we can do that. We already, as SAAPA, have 93 organizations across the country that are signed up as what we call alliance partners. And I'm sure there's a bunch of people here who are not alliance partners that we can start trying to get more of you as alliance partners, but also start to put in place forums that we can actually discuss the issues and develop strategies for dealing with the issue. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Maurice. I think you're talking both nationally, but also locally. I think Noe was pointing out that locally, if people got together, they'd be much stronger. Tlamelo?
Good afternoon, and thank you so much, and thank you to all of the speakers for your very informative presentation, thought-provoking too. Just a quick comment before I go into what it is that I actually wanted to talk about. Thank you also for the work that has gone into lobbying the removal of alcohol from petrol stations. Recently, in a country where I was, alcohol was sold at the petrol station, and I was absolutely appalled because obviously within the South African context, it's something that has been, civil society has been lobbying against for a long time. So, we do see your work, and thank you so much for the work that you do. I think, there was a question about, what exactly is defined as public participation, and I think that a lot of pertinent issues have been raised already in the session, and by people through the questions that they've asked. I mean, if we think about public participation and the fact that it's actually constitutionally mandated, and when we think about why it was mandated, it was to encourage participation at a local government level in decision making and in policy making as well. So if we think about, okay, so what is the public participation framework? Is there a general framework that is all encompassing of different elements or different sectors of society? The only framework that sort of comes to my mind really quickly is the public participation framework that is found at the legislative level. And obviously within reason, because the whole issue was to make sure that people participate in local government matters, right? So it makes sense that, we find it at that level. But it then becomes concerning because, I've currently been looking at public participation and consultation within the mining sector. And a lot of the times, as rightly raised by Ms. Deiedericks, Marka Deiedericks, is that a lot of the times the consultation and public participation are inflated into one thing, and it's actually not one thing. And then you go into having to find out, okay, so if public participation and consultation is something that is also obligated for people that are applying for a mining license, mining or prospecting license or permit, then how is it regulated? And then you start to actually unpack and see that consultation in itself is not defined by any legislation in particular in South Africa. And then you start to see that even when we deal with public participation and it's dealt with under the environmental impact assessment regulations, for example, then you begin to see that it becomes difficult to narrow down exactly what it is the public participation entails. Obviously, it's defined in mining legislation now, and the regulations that are attached to the mining legislation also define how public participation should be carried out. But the point I'm trying to make is that within the mining sector, it's defined. What about in the alcohol sector? What about in the in the schooling sector? What about in all other sectors? Are they then expected to follow the public participation framework of the legislature? And does it then fit? Because if you do look at the public participation framework of the legislature, it's very limited in its reach and in how it actually defines how the process must take place. Because one of the things that have come out of the conversation as well is that public participation is done as a tick box exercise, right? As one of those like, yes, we did it, we went, we spoke to people, we had this conversation, they told us what issues they had, and there's no obligation for that, whoever's undergoing the public participation and consultation process to then go and report on the outcomes and on the issues that were raised by community members, which I think is also a problem in itself. So I think in addressing, thoughts about a way forward, we need to look at public participation structures as they stand currently in South Africa, and then we need to see those public participation structures as they stand. Do they make provisions? Do they define consultation? Do they underline how consultation should take place? Do they properly define public participation? Do they underline how it should take place? Do they have reporting structures for public participation consultation processes? I can tell you now that I went through a public participation process when the NHI bill was being introduced. And a lot of the issues that were raised around the right to health and accessing healthcare facilities, and nothing about the NHI bill. Why? Because the bill was in English, and it's a very complex document that needs to be, considered by lay people, myself included, and then we need to make sense out of it, right? So there are also structures in place that are exclusionary in how it is that consultation and public participation processes actually are conducted. So I think we need to actually find, comb through frameworks and through structures and through processes that are supposed to make sure that people are involved, that their opinions are taken, that they're not just, given an opportunity to comment, but then they are consulted so they understand what it is that they're supposed to be commenting on. It's broken down into very simplified sort of English, and then into languages that are predominant in their areas. So there's a lot of issues, I think, that need to be fine-combed in order to make sure that when we talk about public participation holistically within South Africa, that there are very robust structures in place that allow for a proper public participation and consultation processes to actually take place so that people can be heard, and what it is, the feedback that they give can then inform policy and how policies then legislated going forward. Thank you so much. A mouthful, apologies, but thank you.
Thanks, Camilla. You say a lot of important things. Could I make a suggestion that you just drop Aadielah and Maurice a line with your email? Because I think it will be very helpful to have your input to any material coming out here. I should just say that the seismic survey court case that found that even though the mining industry is supposed to have consultation process, that court finding showed how clearly in practice the consultation was not meaningful and pointless. So I think it's borne out in practice. Russell, you next.
Well, I think hi, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the very interesting and important presentations around this issue. Look, I think Tamara probably covered a lot of the broader frameworks and some of the limitations around the public participation process, but also opened up a much bigger problem. The act of consultation in itself doesn't mean that the inputs of communities are actively considered during those consultations, because there's no feedback loop. Right, so we'll come to the consultation, we'll make known what our feelings maybe on a particular bill is, or a particular action, and they just collect it, a tick box, and then we go through them, and there's no clear criteria to determine how do we respond to public comment, be it in budget processes, be it in governance processes. So for me, I think the organizing thing is really looking at governance more specifically, because I think some of the criticisms around public participation is whose community, whose interests are being represented within public consultation processes. And the people represented there, do they have feedback loops, right, to the communities that they are speaking for within those consultations? So when we sort of bring this back to health, and I think alcohol is essentially a health issue as well, we need to start thinking about how existing governance frameworks within the health sector can be used to strengthen public participation processes. From the Khayelitsha Health Forum, for instance, spoke about the unfair choices that need to be made at the community level around, yes, we're living in an environment where alcohol abuse is normalized, you know, where we even consider selling alcohol to sustain ourselves, and then the interactions with school governing bodies. But in a sense, if you think about it, you know, if we improve the framework or the governance framework around representation in clinic committees, representation of communities within hospital boards, and also what the structure of that representation is. Should we be talking about health committees going beyond just looking at waiting time, but also being considered in the broader role of the health sector in addressing particular health priorities within that community? And I think when we start broadening that conversation to include this, health committees or hospital boards can start sort of articulating themselves around what is the health sector's responsibility in sort of mitigating the impact of substance abuse and alcohol abuse and the broader determinants of ill health within communities. So I don't think we should limit ourselves just to public consultation framework, but rather look and see how we can integrate some of the things that we want to achieve through public consultation by strengthening governance and problematizing existing governance frameworks within the health system. But thank you very much for the webinar. It was very, very, very helpful. And I look forward to further discussions around this issue, particularly around the role of governance in strengthening responsiveness to health at the local level. Thank you. Over.
Thanks, Russell. So you raised a couple of really important points. So the governance issue, and there are structures which are meant to be voices of community. And maybe we should be doing an audit and mobilizing capacity around that and making sure they are strengthened. But you also point to the fact that health issues extend beyond the health sector. And we need to think about how we make those links. So I'm just wondering if I can just run through the things that I've written down here that have come up and see if we've got a sort of sense of a huge number of issues for following up. So I think the key points have been made around how does public participation be meaningful? So it shouldn't just be like you get asked your opinion and then somebody disappears and makes a decision they were going to make anyway, and now they can tick the box that you've been asked. There actually has to be influence. So we have to find ways to show that there has been influence. It's been considered and it's influenced. There's a lot of questions around local government. So local government has policies around participation, but Mdayi described how sub-council meetings don't advertise, or if it's advertised, you can't read it, it's so small. And people aren't educated, so the school governing bodies don't even know about the bill. So we need to do a lot of community awareness raising. We need to do education. We need to get our house in order. There were a set of points made around workers and livelihoods. So if people are making money out of selling alcohol and the policy is trying to do something about that, we have to find replacement livelihoods for them, and we have to protect workers as well. We talk a lot about bringing organizations together, so both at local level and at national level, and I think SAAPA would welcome members on this meeting joining SAAPA, and maybe you can drop a note in the chat if you're interested in joining. We spoke about this idea of a briefing document that would distinguish between public participation and stakeholder engagement. So stakeholder engagement, usually people are lined up and the big stakeholders get all the things to say, whereas meaningful participation is people are properly prepared, they know what they're participating in, and they can see how their participation is going to influence the issue. We also had a suggestion about digital citizenship and taking advantage of online complaints, online organizing. I don't know if there are things that I've left off, but I've sort of summarized a list of things, which I think is a big program for SAAPA to take forward and for all of us to take forward at the moment.
There was just, perhaps there was just one thing around NEDLAC, Leslie, that has emerged.
Okay.
Around participating within the community chamber or the development chamber and demanding equal participation.
Okay, excellent comment, yeah. Okay, are there any other points on what we should be doing going forward? I'm aware that we had set aside till 2:30, but people have been leaving. Perhaps if people want to make any last comments or suggestions.
I think you can check on the chat also, Prof. There's something that said, Mara said about NEDLAC.
Yes, I think Aadielah picked that up. So we need to get back into participating in NEDLAC. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So if I'm correct, some people have put their emails up to join or be informed through SAAPA. We are going to produce a little summary note. Am I correct, Maurice, Aadielah, about how we can take this forward, and we will share it around. Maurice, if you're talking, you are muted, so I can't hear you. But Aadielah has given us a thumbs up. Okay, so I think this has been a very, very helpful webinar. We've had a lot of diverse and different experiences. We've had a lot of ideas, and we've made new contacts and networks. And we think we're going to build the campaign better, and we're going to improve public participation, not just for alcohol, but for all the things that matter for health going forward. So I want to thank everyone, thank PHM, thank SAAPA, thank all the participants in the meeting for being here. And we look forward to seeing you in an action, a march, not just a webinar, but a march or protest or submission or objection or input to a policy or whatever the case may be. Maurice, do you want to have the last word?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that people should be aware that there are a number of critical issues happening right at the moment, some of which I mentioned earlier. One is the Bella Bill, and we have to be prepared for continuing to mobilize people against the liquor clause in the Bella Bill. As you know, the Bella Bill is not just it's an education bill. The liquor clause is just one part of it, but we really have to mobilize people, especially if they're going to be public hearings across all the provinces. Then there's the whole issue of petrol stations. We need to continue to fight that, and one way to do that is for people to object to these licenses. So we are trying to find ways to assist people to find applications for licenses. But I can just tell you, by the way, we are in a very fortunate position in South Africa today, in the 21st century, that you can get government gazettes for free from the government printing works. You can download them from there. So all of the liquor government gazettes, which advertise the applications for liquor licenses, can be downloaded from the provincial, from the national government printing works. You just go to their website, go to liquor outlets, and you will see them all listed there. You can download them. You can look and see, is there a liquor license being applied for in your area, at a petrol station, at a school, anywhere? And do you want to object to it? The Western Cape, you can get it from their own website, the Liquor Authority's website. Then there's the other issue that we are looking at the moment is the issue of Heineken, which is buying Distell. So now both of the major producers of alcohol in South Africa are not going to be owned by South Africans anymore. So the pressure from the global liquor industry is going to become even worse. And one of the things that they've argued in their persuading of the Competition Commission to allow them to buy Distell is that there are 6 so-called social or public interest things they've committed to doing. One of which is that they've undertaken to spend 10 billion rand in the next 5 years in order to extend their business. And presumably they've put that in there, showing that they're going to grow the economy of the country and create jobs and so on. But actually what they're going to be doing is just getting more people to drink more of their products. That's their objective. So one of the things we are doing is we're intervening in that process, and we are saying that actually the Competition Commission should demand that they put a large sum of money into a health promotion development fund, which can then be used for alcohol harm reduction work by organizations like SAAPA and many of the organizations that you guys are working for. And the other thing is we are also, with the Enyobeni case, which is a really good example of a situation where the system has completely failed the community. We are busy in a process of engaging with the families and with the community there. And we are trying to work with the Human Rights Commission to push for an independent inquiry similar to the kind of inquiry that was done into Marikana and into Life Isidimeni, with a view to exposing the failure of national, provincial, and local governments to protect those kids, and not just those kids, but people who die in and around taverns every single day, every single weekend. So we're wanting this inquiry to be showing up the failure of government around these issues. So these are all things that we are going to be working on, and that we really would want support around them. We want people to do their own thing around them. I think Maui's idea about going to SGBs, please, everybody who's on this group, if you are connected to a school, if you have a kid in school, go to the SGB, get them to say they don't want alcohol at the schools. It's really important to get people at that level to be saying these things, and we will do what we can to assist you with that.
Okay,
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Maurice. Aadielah, I need to leave, so can you wrap up, because I'm teaching in 2 minutes time. So I want to thank everyone and hand over to you to close the meeting. Thanks very much.
Sure. Thanks. So I was going to just say that the last two things that Maurice mentioned, in Nyobeni, as well as the Heineken deal, are not to say that the Bala issue and the petrol station is not important, and it's not urgent, but the Nyobeni case is that there is a hearing on the 25th of November, 25th, 26th of November, and we would like to get support for action around that. And then in terms of the Heineken Distal merger, this is within the next 10 days that we have to make a possible public or physical submission. And so it would be great if there are people in this group that wants to lend their support for the call that we are making, because then that is what we can take into that meeting to say that this is, SAAPA represents 94 organizations, but this is another pool of organizations that is putting their name against this. But perhaps to just close the meeting and just thank everybody for coming. We are slowly losing everybody, but great. And we look forward to continuing to have a conversation with you. Annaline, I'm not sure whether or not you were able to get all the email addresses, but I'm sure from your list of people that registered, we would have a list that we can give a small report back to. And hopefully through that process, we can continue to engage. And maybe there is a thing about having this regularly so that we can talk about all the things that you're doing, and the things we are doing, and how we bring those things together. So just thank you once again on behalf of SAAPA and People's Health Movement. And we look forward to engaging.